our human behavior, like how we're naturally hardwired, it's kind of like a rubber band in its natural state. So we can do and be anything, right? We can stretch, but it's going to be under constant tension, energy, and effort, right? But
Mhm.
eventually, you're going to have to let off, and it's going to snap back to its natural state. So what you see is like we can do and be anything. We try to be that integrator, and of course we could, but you're always going to eventually snap back to who you are. So it's not to say don't try hard things. My argument is we can find adversity in our lane. There's plenty of adversity within our own lane, but really it's more about like how do we not stretch over long periods of time, and how do we just find somebody who can do that and that can do it better than we can? Because if we're trying to do multiple things as a business owner, even if you think you're better at it than everybody else, if you only have 50% of your energy and bandwidth dedicated towards that because you're doing other things, somebody else's 100% is going to be way better than your 50%.
Craft Your Life is a radio show for the tenacious, the bold, and those who refuse to settle for mediocrity. We bring together visionaries, game changers, and relentless go-getters who are crafting their lives, businesses, and relations in pursuit of excellence. If you are ready to shatter limits, embrace the amazing, and live life on your own terms, this show is for you. Each episode delivers actionable insights, inspiring stories, and unfiltered conversations that will ignite your drive to win a life worth dying for. Tune in and get ready to live viciously. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Craft Your Life radio show. I'm your host, Matthew Kuehlhorn. Today, I'm sitting down with a baller, Brian Alexander. He's a business guide, a leadership coach, a best-selling author of How to Succeed in Spite of Yourself, the ultimate guide to leadership through self-awareness. And with over 2 decades of entrepreneurship, building sales teams, business coaching, and talent optimization consulting experience, growing and scaling companies, Brian partners with CEOs and business owners of $3 to $10 million service-based companies. Brian, your mission is to equip leaders with the systems, tools, and self-awareness needed to create a category of one in their industries. I'm really excited to speak with you. I've known you just for a little bit, and you run pretty fast, and a lot of stuff that you'll put out into social media and your channels is really inspiring around people. Just in, rereading your intro there, the self-awareness component has me very curious, and I'm excited to drop into there. To start us out, man, will you just let the listeners know where you are beaming in from right now, and where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I am in Savannah, Georgia right now,
Awesome.
but grew up in the North Shore suburbs of Chicago, and
Yes.
you know, lived there for the first 40 years of my life. And after 2020, we decided we needed a change, and we just picked a spot on the map. Never been to Savannah, didn't know anybody. Packed up our 2 cars and 2 dogs and 2 children, and rented an apartment online and took off. So here we are.
That's amazing.
Where did you start your, I guess, did you grow up as a kid in the north suburbs, Chicago? What was that like for you? Was it suburb living? Was it more free for all? I mean, I guess suburbs could be pretty free, but what was it like growing up?
Yeah, it wasn't like gated community suburb. We were
Yeah.
about 20 minutes outside of Chicago in a city called Niles, Illinois. Very,
Okay.
kind of middle class. My dad was a tool and die maker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, right? So didn't necessarily grow up with a ton of money, but definitely had a great childhood. My dad did everything he needed to do to provide and all of that. My mom was great. So, just blessed to have had a great kind of upbringing and childhood. And it was before the invent of all of the technology on the screens, no
Yep.
iPads, none of that. And got to explore and just run around, all over the city really and past the city limits. So I'm grateful for that for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Give us a little bit of a summary. So obviously now you are into business consulting, and I'm looking for a little bit of the journey of how you got there. So I mean, even like what I always love doing in these conversations is tying together somebody's upbringing into what they're doing now, because a lot of times I'll find continuity. I mean, were you always pushing limits? And I know you're way into physical health and different pursuits there. I mean, did that start for you in middle school, high school, or was that later on in your journey?
That was a little later on. I'd say, at around 16 and 17, I got into health and fitness and got more serious about it in my early 20s. But I was like a gym bro, right? Did it for all the wrong reasons, just to look good. I can't say I was in shape, but I looked like I was in shape at the
Uh
time,
huh.
right? So, but yeah, it was interesting. I didn't really, I played sports all my life, traveling all-star baseball, basketball, always played sports year round, everything, right? But going into high school, I was only 4'9", and
Wow.
I remember it was the summer before high school basketball tryouts, and I was like I was a starter. I was a point guard, always like the number 2 guy, right? I was really good. I went to a Catholic school, so it was a smaller, I guess, subset of people compared to the big
Hmm.
public school that I went to for high school. And summer tryouts was doing pretty well, but I was outsized by everybody. But I made it down to the last cut. And the last cut was me and another guy. And the other guy was about 6 feet tall or 6'2" or something like that. And then there was me at like 4'9", and I got cut. I was the last one. So he made it. I didn't make it. And I was devastated because I
Mm.
played sports, competitive sports, my entire life. And I didn't really have a plan. And ended up being that a friend just convinced me to join golf, which I never golfed in my life. I never desired to golf, but I ended up joining, and it was probably one of the best things that I've ever done. Of course, I remember sitting on the golf bus and kind of like, after school, all the sports happen, right? And on the golf bus, I would always like lean back as the football team would walk past the golf bus, embarrassed of it, right? But now I'm glad I did, because I'm sure all those football players wished that they would have learned how to golf in high school, right?
Amazing. How'd you get into business consulting?
So, I ran, I how could I say this? I opened and I was a partner in a restaurant and lounge downtown Chicago,
Okay.
uh, on Randolph Street, the big like dining district, and invested a ton of money and had my partners completely rob me
Really?
of it. And this was I was about
Mm.
23 years old. Um, and that just completely devastated me. So it's a long journey to business consulting, but that was my first journey into entrepreneurship, even though it ended up terribly and brought me down a pretty difficult path. I kind of caught that bug of building something of your own, kind of leading the charge, having your ideas come to life. So that was a big genesis of that all. I ended up, you know, getting robbed and losing a ton of money. Ended up going into the corporate world right after that and going into sales at a Fortune 30 company called CDW. And that was a difficult kind of start from going from entrepreneurship, and the nightlife is, you're up until 6, 7 a.m. and you're sleeping until 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. This was like, the opposite, right? Now I had to answer to somebody. You had to call and smiling dial from their sales academy. And I was pretty terrible at it at first, but eventually kind of learned how to do it, got better at it, had a great mentor that kind of took me under their wing, and ended up growing to the top 10% in that company in sales, right?
Awesome.
It was pretty amazing. A lot of lessons embedded in there. We can, probably speak for an hour just about that chapter in my life. But I learned the art of delegation. I hired a full-time sales admin. I went all in on my superpowers, and that was a big lesson from that chapter. So these things started kind of connecting, right? You can only connect the dots looking back, But that was another big piece of my entrepreneurial journey, even though it was working in corporate sales. I understood and I put into practice delegating, hiring people who are smarter than you at what they do, and then going all in on your strengths. And it paid off. We grew our book of business from like 2 million to 37 million, year
Amazing.
after year after year from that perspective. And that just proved the concept, right? From there, I opened a gym, a CrossFit gym. And all of these things kind of, overlap, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tends to be like a 5 to 7 year shelf life of what I do, but there's always like a 2 year overlap of the next thing, which is pretty amazing and difficult, but common theme, I guess. And so I opened a gym for my wife. It was a CrossFit gym. I was still in sales at the company called CDW, crushing it, making a ton of money. And I'm like, hey, this will be a great hobby for you. Ended up opening a CrossFit gym. It was something that we were really passionate about and doing as members. And that was my first dive back into entrepreneurship. And I remember I hired her a mentor, a business mentor, because she's not really a business oriented person. Hired her a business mentor and she resented me completely. She didn't want to run a business. She wanted no part of being, an owner of a business. She just wanted to come and do CrossFit workouts. So I drastically miscalculated that with my wife, right? And she ended up having a miscarriage during that time and kind of completely checked out from
Mhm.
a mental standpoint and emotional standpoint. It was a tough, tough time. And I remember sitting there like this, my sales gig was killing it, making a ton of money. But now this gym that I opened in a 1,600 square foot, warehouse was growing leaps and bounds. And my plan was she was supposed to be the manager of it,
Mhm.
running it, right, from the operations standpoint. And I remember it was just like, 20 members per month coming in, and then it's recurring. So we quickly grew to like 100 members per month in like the matter of 6 months, which is insane. And we ended up going from 1,600 square feet to 12,000 square feet to then 17,000 square feet,
Wow.
all within a year.
Wow.
Um, and I was just like, I was making massive gambles with that gym because I didn't need the money, obviously. So I was reinvesting everything as we were growing because I was making a ton of money in sales. But it ended up coming to a head where I had to make a choice. This business that was a hobby just blew up and took off. The sales gig, I was still doing great at it, but obviously my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I found myself kind of being spread a little bit thin. And I decided to cut the cord on the sales gig and go all in on the gym thing, and ended up becoming a business mentor for the business mentor that I hired.
Right on. That's awesome.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Cooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommer Garage Door Openers. In our opinion, Sommers are the highest quality product on the market today. We recommend them for all of our residential garage door installs because of the variety of features they include, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features such as a fixed chain, which moves along a secure rail to ensure your garage door opens quietly and safely. Click on the link in the description to learn more about Sommer Garage Door Openers.
I'm really curious. So, one of the things we talk about in this thought of crafting a life, and that could be crafting a business, crafting a relationship, crafting your health, at the base point, and some of the stuff that I read as I was prepping for this, you have a big focus around self-awareness. And I think that's so critical for really identifying what we want to craft, because we have to have the awareness of where we're at to even understand what we want. And
Yeah.
so there's a number of different pieces in here. But could you highlight, like, are there experiences or pivot points for you in your journey that really brought self-awareness to a head? And how did you end up going down that focus, and what does it ultimately bring back to you?
Yeah. It's so during that CrossFit gym ownership journey, into coaching other gyms as well. We taught a operating system, kind of like an EOS but it was
Mhm.
very specific to gyms. It was called Two Brain Business, and fully baked out system. Probably in parallel to what EOS was building, but not really. It wasn't inspired by that. It was just we so happened to build it for gyms, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I built that gym out of a pure visionary energy and philosophy. But when I went all in on owning and operating the gym, now I was wearing the visionary hat and I was wearing the integrator hat. And I was proficient enough at the integrator to fool everybody into thinking I was an integrator,
Yeah, I know that.
including all my team members. So they couldn't quite understand why I was trying to delegate things, right? And they were kind of like, well, you're the owner, you should be doing this. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not really my thing. Um, but even that, and then coaching other businesses, like you kind of take on this integrator type of role in a sense, right? But it was really like not my superpower. Like I'm a really good visionary and I understand where the pieces need to go. But I'm not like the person that should be executing it. I really shouldn't be in the weeds, even though I could do it. But I did that for about 2 years, and it was taking a toll on my I would say even my mental health. I didn't quite understand what was happening, but I also recognized that the more I became the integrator rather than the visionary, and the more I got into the business and I started just focusing on only the metrics, I kind of took away my visionary superpower, and the business kind of started to dive a little bit, right?
Mm.
And they started making changes just based on only data, and it was a very interesting time. And I kept remembering that, look, something is wrong here. I don't know quite how to say it or articulate it, but I don't think I'm the one that should be doing this. And I read the book Rocket Fuel, by Wickman, and that was just life changing because it connected the dots for me. Where I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. I need a integrator. Like I'm trying to be both, but I'm really like a visionary. I can kind of be the integrator, but I can't be it for a sustained amount of time and do it well. Like there's other people that are way better at that than I am. And that was just
Mhm.
a aha moment. Kind of this big, just like, change in paradigms. And then I started to think a little bit about like, oh, wow, well, let me figure out who I am, because I kept kind of pointing the finger at everybody. And, everybody was failing me. I'd give them opportunities and they would fail. And I kept kind of pointing the finger at everybody else. And after so many failures, I was like, well, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's actually me. And maybe I need to figure out like what is happening here. That's when I first did the Colby index assessment.
Mhm.
So this was all during that same time. And I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. I remember giving my wife my Colby and just saying, look, honey, this is me. This explains me better than I can explain myself. And at the time, I also had a team of about 15 to 20 team members and employees at the gym. And I gave it to them. I'm like, this is me. And I gave them each their Colby. And we had a big kind of Colby session around it. I ended up getting
Mhm.
certified and the whole nine. But then I started like rearranging the pieces based on people's strengths. And then I started thinking like, we need to do this for all business owners. Like we tell them what to do, we tell them how to do it, but we don't tell them who should be doing it. And that was like the big missing link. Um, and once I kind of figured that out, then I was like, oh, every leader needs to know who they are first so they don't make concessions for who they aren't. And then they have to understand the people they're surrounding themselves with so they can fill their fits and gaps kind of like strategically. And then you can go do good work. It
Yes.
was this mind blowing thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, I love this. There's a couple different directions I wanna go, but you're also, whether it's intentional or not, probably dripping in some of the components around other assessments. You are heavily, into predictive index,
That's correct. Yeah.
and there's a ton of insights in there. So, similar to your story, I've found culture index, which is very similar predictive index, but that type of awareness really shook the way that I thought about structuring teams, right? And with that insight, self-aware and people aware, then it is about structuring people's strengths into the right seats. Some of us are really good with the details and the minutia, and some of us are really good with brainstorming and wide thinking. Um, and fish can't jump. But here's my question. Here's a question for you. Um, in all of this, I can imagine some listeners are sitting here. They might have, young businesses and be at this precipice of scale where, as a founder, I really had to play both, especially when it was just me and a few people. Like I had to have the vision for where I was going, and I had to have my feet on the ground and do the nuts and bolts of today and tomorrow. And um, you and I have similar personalities in some ways, and I can do the integrator. I can do the management, the nitty gritty stuff for a short period of time, and then I'll be like, I need to free myself or whatever it is. So my question, with your background and all this personality stuff, like why can't we just double down on discipline and hold the line in those spaces that might not be my natural strengths?
So I always have a rubber band with me. And this is, if you take one thing from this whole podcast and interview, it is our human behavior, like how we're naturally hardwired. It's kind of like a rubber band in its natural state. So we can do and be anything, right? We can stretch, but it's going to be under constant tension, energy, and effort, right? But eventually, you're going to have to let off, and it's going to snap back to its natural state. So what you see is like we can do and be anything. We try to be that integrator, and of course we could, but you're always going to eventually snap back to who you are. So it's not to say don't try hard things. My argument is we can find adversity in our lane. There's plenty of adversity within our own lane, but really it's more about like, how do we not stretch over long periods of time? And how do we just find somebody who can do that and that can do it better than we can? Because if we're trying to do multiple things as a business owner, even if you think you're better at it than everybody else, if you only have 50% of your energy and bandwidth dedicated towards that because you're doing other things, somebody else's 100% is going to be way better than your 50%. I don't care if you're better at it than they are. That's still the case, right? They're
Yeah.
100% focus and energy toward that thing, especially if they're wired for it. They're going to run circles around you. But I think as business owners, we're afraid to delegate because we don't know that that person is going to be able to do it as good or better than we can. And that's where the objective data comes in, because now we know if they're wired for it and probably, either wired as well or better than us, and we can just delegate with confidence. Then you can begin to delegate freely, then coach, right? Instead of micromanage and, tell them how to do it. If you've ever read the book, Who Not How, if you can find the right who, don't worry about the how. You can give them some guidelines and playbooks, but chances are if you have the right who, they're going to be able to create a much better playbook than you ever would with your limited time and energy, right?
Yes, love this. So let's talk about some of that objective data. Like, how do you utilize it? How might you suggest to somebody that is not currently using a tool, like even engage, even start? Like,
So
yeah,
at a very minimum, there's 800 assessments out there on
yeah,
the market, right? You Google assessments,
yeah,
and it's growing because it's very popular. But out of those 800 assessments, there's only a small handful that are scientifically validated to be used for hiring and selection. Um, so if you're gonna use data, you better make sure that it's stable and repeatable over time, and that it doesn't change test over test. So I would recommend, at a very minimum, business owners or leaders or whoever you are, take an assessment and just understand who you are. And then once you understand who you are, you're going to really understand that everybody has kind of their own unique wiring and genius, and that we're here to work with others and build teams that fill each other's gaps. And once we do that, then we can accomplish the unthinkable. So just start with that assessment for yourself. Predictive index is great, culture index is good, Colby is good. One of those, even DISC. DISC is good for understanding your communication style, not designed for hiring, but still there's gold in a lot of them. So
Yeah.
pick one, learn about yourself first, and then really it's like start giving these things to your team members so you can understand who they are. But more importantly, most people aren't self-aware. So I guarantee you, if you have 10 team members, 8 of them are not self-aware. They just take opportunities because they think it's the next logical step. Maybe you're a great leader and they'll run through walls for you. And you're like, all right, well, let's give it a whirl. And they end up failing you. A lot of that comes from them just not being self-aware enough to know what the role entails and that if they can do it and excel in it. But really, it's your fault as a leader if you get it wrong because you set them up to fail.
That's right.
So take it a little more seriously and start using data to make your people decisions, and that will take a lot of the chaos out of your life.
Yeah. And I think for listeners that haven't used these types of tools, I mean, a lot of these tools are starting to quantify and qualify personality traits that can then, play into a specific role. And so in my very practical realm, we are looking for an individual who is going to be great at sales and talking with homeowners, right? And so there's some specific personalities there. I want somebody that has a little bit of a drive and isn't going to just retreat at the first no. And I want somebody that's extroverted who's going to be really aware of how they look and present and interacting with customers without getting, bogged down. Like it's only energizing to them to interact with other people, right? And so these are some of the things that can be extracted in these tools. That's very objective, scientific. And now I can know if John's more apt for a sales role or more apt for like crunching numbers role.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sales is not sales, is not sales, is not sales. And salespeople are not all the same, right? So your sales role might need something completely different than the
Yeah.
next 5 opportunities for a sales role. So I kind of use this. I think this works well here. I use the analogy of like a starting lineup of a basketball team. You have a point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. They all have their unique attributes that allow them to play their position well. But what happens if you take them all off the court and you put the point guard at center and the shooting guard at power forward and you throw them all back onto the court, right? They're going to still be playing the game of basketball and arguably the game that they love. And this is why it's relevant to sales because people are like, yeah, I'm a sales guy or sales girl, or I'm in sales. So that starting lineup analogy is huge. You've thrown them back onto the court, and now all of a sudden, that point guard is highly effective or ineffective in their role. And they're going to work every day getting beat up, and the fans are upset, and the coach is upset. And it's just because you have them in the wrong position. So there's, hunter sales, there's farmer sales, there's specific motivating drives and behaviors that allow one to excel and the other one would probably not do too well. And of course they can stretch, but that's not sustainable for them or for you as the business owner and company, right? So even if they were able to stretch and do a good job, chances are they're not going to do a good job for more than 3 months or 6 months or a year before you start to see performance problems rear their head, or they just burn out, right? And they snap.
Hmm. Yeah, the rubber band analogy is a good one because that's exactly what it comes down to. Like, how do I play in my like sweet spot so that I don't hit that burnout or um, where it's like under deliver on, on expectations because it's not my skill or strength, right?
Right, right. And I really do think everybody does want to do a good job. They
Yeah.
want to be good team members, good employees, but oftentimes we see performance problems and or kind of like lack of employee engagement as a direct result of what the job needs and then who the person is and kind of the gap between that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you partner with companies who are your clients and you start working with them, do you always start in the same spot?
So, with the predictive index, it depends, right? One thing I really like to do, like, with any company or executive team is we want to look at their entire team. So if you're the business owner and you have a group of just, let's say, 5 managers under you, I would have you do a what we call a subjective assessment. We call it a talent assessment. And there is basically, 4 quadrants. It's a square. The bottom quadrant, we're going to rank them on productivity and performance, 0 through 10, and then 0 through 10 up and down on culture fit or core values fit,
Yeah.
right? So are they killing it and crushing it in the role? And then how well do they represent your core values? Do they live them? Do they breathe them? If you had the most important meeting coming up and you were sick, would you feel comfortable sending that person to represent you as well or better than you could represent yourself and your company? That's a 10 in culture. 10 in performance is going to be, somebody who's just a rock star, killing it, constantly exceeding expectations, whether it's sales or leadership, growth, whatever the case might be. So the 10 and 10 is like an A player. That's a very small 9 out of 9 or 10 out of 10 A player. It's a small box on that square. But really you want to make sure you have people in the 6 and 6 and above. Those are called A potential players. They're amazing. We want to make sure that they have the potential to grow, but we also want to make sure that we have the coaching plan to help them go up and to the right, right? So they're constantly growing within their profession. So I like to do that first. And then we start doing the behavioral assessments with the objective data, because we can use that to diagnose performance problems. We can also use a lot of it to diagnose culture problems. So, having that first talent assessment done, the leader's subjective view of where every one of their team members falls, and then create a coaching plan. But then we dive in with the data and say, okay, well, if they're lower on performance, maybe they're not in the right seat. Have I gave them all the training that they need and all the skills and all of that? If yes, and they're still low on performance, then we have to look at, okay, maybe they're just in the wrong seat. So that data
Mhm.
really helps that case.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Across the board of companies that you've worked with, are there commonalities? And I'm kind of reaching here, but my spidey sense says that there probably is. Um, so open-ended question, like top 1, 2, or 3 commonalities across these mid-level kind of size companies that you guys run into? Is there a
Nobody has
common thing or is it all everything?
nobody has an idea of what they're doing from a people perspective. So I work with smaller roofing companies all the way up to a $250 million national paving company, right? So in everywhere in between, and nobody has a clue. So if you're a small roofing company and you feel like you're way behind, trust me, I work with everywhere in between. The people part is the hardest part for everyone to get and nail down. And human beings are the most complex creatures on the planet. So even with the work we do, we mitigate risk. We kind of take out all of the other variables, at least, or minimize them. So you can't control crazy and things happening in life events, but we can minimize a lot of that and kind of cold the chaos a bit. But I'd say not a lot of them really take time to think about the talent strategy. They spend a lot of time thinking about business strategy. They use data to inform their business decisions, but most people just kind of wing it when it comes to the people. They'll go off their intuitive gut. They'll
Hmm.
promote people based on, maybe nepotism. Maybe it's a family member, and they get themselves into these really kind of tight spots because they don't just take a second to zoom out a little bit, create an actual talent strategy deliberately, and then execute. So one thing I do with most of the companies that I work with is we do a 2-day offsite full on, we're creating your talent strategy. We're mapping out the next 12 to 18 months, and then we're executing on that. So they leave that 2 days just fully equipped, on fire, and they know exactly what to do.
I love that. Yeah, it's quote bubbles up when you share that. I mean, it's not always about having more people. Sometimes it's just a matter of having better people.
It really is. I think, we define an A player as somebody who does at least 4 times as much work as the next person. So 4 times more productive than the next person. So you can make an argument that more is not better. And if you really take time to evaluate and then use data, and then really it's like, look, once we've kind of evaluated that person on a talent assessment, and let's say they score low for 2 quarters in a row, as a business owner, if you've done everything you could to help them progress, but they're still not progressing, and you can't find another seat for them, um, you have to, I like to liken it to keeping the health of a plant or a tree. As a business owner, it's your job to make sure that your tree is healthy and flourishing. And to be able to do that, sometimes you have to prune. And that's one of the hardest things as well, is letting people go that don't quite fit, the next iteration of where your business is going. They might have got you here, but they're not going to help you get to the next plateau, right? Or the next pinnacle.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, love it. I think for, again, listeners that might not have familiarity with predictive index or some of these tools that you're referencing, some of them are behind paywalls. Some of them are relatively cheap. I mean, definitely encourage anybody listening to go check out one or two or multiple of these things. Like you said, there's 800 of them. But the question that I have, like, with your knowledge of these assessments, using them, then seeing people in the wild and interacting with people, have you been able to distill, and I'm looking for like extracting um, one or a couple different tips for folks in utilizing almost a filter. Like there's a self-awareness piece, and then there's a filter piece. Like I now know I've started to relate, extroversion. Um, and I can be extroverted when I need to be extroverted, right? Or introverted. And I can see when people are extroverted now because of my knowledge with assessments and how I've been utilizing them. So I'm wondering if there's a couple of things that you go to that might even be able to be explained and then in the tool bag of somebody that's listening. Like just delineating some components of personality. We could take it anywhere, but if it's, for a specific role or, I don't know, kind of a loose-ended question, man, but just seeing if you might have some practical tools based on your knowledge of these assessments and real life application that could be communicated through voice. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess that is a loaded question. It's
It
a little
is.
challenging to distill it. Um, but I can talk about maybe a couple ways to go about finding out what your superpowers are and then what you should delegate. I talk about it in my book. I kind of liken it to heaven, hell, and purgatory. And so you make, basically 3 columns: heaven, hell, and purgatory. Heaven is the stuff that like you light up while doing, that energizes you, that you can literally do all day long. You're great at it, and you're just energized by it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Purgatory is the stuff you're proficient at, but really indifferent about. You
Hmm.
don't love it. You don't necessarily hate it. Doesn't drain you, but you're decent at it. You can do it. And then hell, of course, is the stuff that you loathe, that drains you. That, if you had to do that 8 hours a day, if you would figure out very quickly, that you would be a miserable human being, and that would be a terrible existence.
Yeah.
So the easy way to distill that is everything you do in your business on a day to day, make those 3 columns and then fill them up. The hell stuff is stuff, just delegate that immediately. If you just do that, your life will get 10 times better, and you will be a lot more productive because that stuff isn't weighing and bogging you down. I will say, make sure that you do delegate it to somebody who lights up while doing it, because that would be a massive disservice to that person if you give them your hell and it's also their hell, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of where the assessments come into play a little bit, is understanding like who might be good at that. But that's just a very simple way to do that, and then re-audit that every quarter, and
Yeah.
you'll be surprised at how much you start delegating, because you're like, wow, I didn't realize that I'm doing all this stuff, and it's really taking you away from doing the other stuff. And oftentimes the other stuff is what's going to move the needle. It's like those few levers that you could pull are going to help you drive your business forward by 3x or 5x or 10x eventually. And you need to stay there. But if you're bogged down by the other stuff, and I will say this too, just because it's your hell doesn't mean it's not somebody else's heaven within your own company. So even just having conversations without any data, hey, how do you feel about doing this? Do you light up while doing that? Or is that something that you feel like, you get sick of and you be drained by? And just do that with every single team member. And you'll start to kind of compile lists of like, wow, this guy is really good at that. They want to do that. They want to do more of that. People will like literally perk up if you give them stuff that they excel at and that they feel like they can make a massive impact at, rather than just, working to work, right?
Yes. I love that, man. You did a great job answering that convoluted question, because that very simple framework of the three columns, heaven, hell, purgatory. I mean, that starts with the self-awareness for sure, but then it also offers the reflection to go and see how the other folks in your company that are already here are different, or maybe I just had a rhythm and I've hired like people and now I have to go, find some diversity, right?
Yeah,
And I've seen both.
we tend to hire people that are most like us, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we end up with like just kind of clones of us, and nobody, you know, quite fills the gaps that need to be filled.
That's right.
So that's always a fun challenge for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But really good insights. I mean, I love the start with self-awareness and then extracting that out to see the differences in people. And then, like, when we go far enough into this realm, I have now started, seeing where a position is needed.
Mm.
But now I'm going to craft a message to the type of person I need in that role. And
100%.
that's not going to be attracted to Matt necessarily. So it's tweaking to a very specific personality, whether that person needs to be super detailed and very slow paced, or high paced and extrovert. Like there's differences in there, right? And so
You
it's
got it.
it's a deep, deep rabbit hole.
You're fishing with the right bait. Let's put it that way, right?
That's right. That's right. Um, where can people reach out to you, Brian? Where do we
Yes,
find you?
they can find me Facebook, LinkedIn, www.readyandclimb.com. Any of those, you can reach out to me. You can actually take the predictive index assessment on my website for free. You'll get a full 5-page report kit, dives into your strengths and cautions, how you're wired, what your influencing style is, what your selling style is. It's a crazy, crazy report, and it's free. So I highly recommend you jump on there, readyandclimb.com, and take the predictive index free assessment. And then, if you want to go on Amazon, my book is How to Succeed in Spite of Yourself, and it's the ultimate guide to leadership through self-awareness. Very easy read. It's told in a story format. A lot of leadership lessons packed in there. They all kind of tie into self-awareness, but just a lot of my experience that I've gained and wisdom I've gained over the last, 25 years, screwing up quite a bit.
I love that. We'll have all those links and details in our show notes, so folks drive over to check out Brian. And before I let you go, Brian, your Ready, Aim, Climb and your pinnacle, like a lot of this it looks like it's referencing outdoor adventure. Maybe some mountaineering in your background. Are you a climber?
It's not, but we liken or I'm not, but we liken, building a business to climbing a mountain, right?
Yes.
There's, you know, there are certain pinnacles that once we get there, we don't realize there's another climb after that and then another climb after that. And to climb a mountain, you need the right tools. You need a guide who's been there before. And then you need a vision big enough to rally everybody around you to take that climb with you. And of course, you want people you can trust that if you break your leg, that they will take care of you, right? So when you're building a business, growing a business, climbing a mountain, they all kind of play together, right? You want to have the right tools, right guide, and have a great team around you to enjoy that climb.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Well, I appreciate our convo and appreciate your time. And I just appreciate how you show up and deliver value. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love it.
Incredibly humbled and honored. I can't believe I'm saying this. We have over 2,400 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and we're just growing. It is amazing. And your likes, your subscribes, and your shares have helped us get here. So let's grow this thing together and just know that you are appreciated.